Hello everyone, my name is Mateusz Stopczański and today I'm joined by the rest of my team, Tariq, Mete, Momchil and Ernest to present the outcome of our EVE Online based game. The game we created is a first-person puzzle game where the player is exploring the ship that have been hijacked by the pirates and he have to fight through the AI.
So, to give a brief background of where you are as we're starting the game, at this point you've gone around the ship quite briefly, everything's been fine, and suddenly you were killed in the pilot bay. The AI seems to think that the ship is going haywire. The ship's going haywire because of you, and so it's trying to kill you now. You've woken up in the clone room, and this is where we're starting from.
So whenever the player restarts the first time in this area, he will be welcomed by the one of the main characters' voice line.
Elise! Ellie, can you hear me? Ellie, are you there?
This is your friend Roust. He's a fellow person in your group of miners. And he is the only other person you'll be able to hear from. You'll be able to hear audio logs from the ship's previous commander, who is now your superior, Commander Emmett, which you'll hear as we go through.
The first room that the player is spawning is one of the most important room of this game, where the player will be storing his clones. Clones represent the numbers of the try the player have to solve the game. Each time the player dies, one of the clones will be removed, and whenever all of the clones are removed, the game has to be started again. Basically, player will be coming to this location very often to keep track of his clones, and anytime he died in the game. After a short introduction to the gameplay, player will have an opportunity to explore the room and the functionality of the game. However, very quickly he will discover that he is not able to do much because he don't have the tools needed to progressing in the game. Then the game will be pushed forward by launching another event.
Quick, Ellie, use the room's console. You've got to hack past your AI to stop her purging the room. I'm slowing her down on my end, but you've got to hustle.
So the player will be prompted to interact with the first puzzle in the games in order to save the clones. If he will not interact with the puzzle or fail the puzzle, all of the clones present will die, which will leave the player only with the life that he is currently playing.
In this puzzle, the player has to connect the pipes from the top left side of the screen to the bottom right side of the screen.
Upon the completion, there will be a first time when the AI is speaking to the player.
It seems there is an issue with my processing speed. Pilot Elise, you have directly sabotaged the crucial optimization for the mission. Eliminating your current iteration is now a top priority. Proceeding.
After that, player will be able to explore the game further. After some time spent in the room, hopefully he will be able to find the tool. That will be the first tool, which is the fixing tool.
In the event of subsequent malfunctions, the procedure is as follows. Use the repair tool in the damaged area and align the connectors to each other at the optimal time. Too early and you could further any damage. Too late and it won't mend the damaged components. This will not completely solve the issue if left unchecked for too long, but it should give you enough time to organize suitable repairs.
What could be observed in the example that have been played before is how we are planning to introduce the parts of the lore and the world of the EVE Online in the future iteration of the games. We are planning to scatter across the environments the objects that player can collect or interact with, which will reward him with pieces of the story in the form of the audio logs, of the written narrative logs. Further, after unlocking the first tool, which in the further versions of the game, all of the tools and the items the player will be able to pick up or interact with will be highlighted in a way that will be understandable from the player, and it will be facilitated in the patterns, which means across the game these items will all share the same artistic theme or will have something that is very specific for them, so player can easily find them in the environment. And after collecting this tool, the player will be finally able to leave the first room that he's spawning in. It is possible not by going by main entrance, which will be unlocked further in the game, by taking one of the side routes, which is in form of the vent. Player, after acquiring the fixing tool, is able to open the hatch. Then after coming to this sneaking stage of the character controller, he will be able to traverse the level from the side. We are planning to facilitate this vent system across the future development of the game, as we want to achieve the alternative routing for the player, where he will be able to avoid the dangerous parts of the ship, and will reward him for the mastery and explorations. So after traversing the first vent the player will acquire, he will end up in one of the bedrooms.
One form of the rewards that we've decided upon throughout the exploration of the game are these alternative routes. If the player goes around and explores enough, they might be able to find different, faster routes to get to the areas they want to reach beforehand. Seeing as every time they die, they'll be found in the clone bay, they'll be respawned in the clone bay. They would like an easier path to get back to where they were previously.
The interconnected level design was made to give the player a sense of mastery over the space. Since all the corridors are winding, all the pathways are straight, but there's plenty of smaller, like, side paths that the player might not get on their first time. Environmental storytelling was a big part of the game, like with this fallen light fixture that was, on the ceiling, but the cable sort of came loose and it fell down, but the light's still working, sort of thing. This window here into the clone bay is very important because it sort of gives you a sense of space where you've traveled through the vent, not really knowing where you were, sort of going where the game told you to go. This gives you your bearing on where you are in the world, and helps you with navigation in the future.
As the player previously found a fixing tool, he will be able to interact with some of the puzzles scattered across the level. We can still observe that this is not the case for all of them. He still need to find the second tool. However, he will be able to interact with a fixing puzzle, which is locking another type of the door. As you can see, there is a clear difference in between the puzzles, between the fixing and a hacking puzzle. So player will be able to quickly see if he can progress this direction or he should seek the other tool. So whenever the player is approaching the puzzle,
the player has to avoid the obstacles that are coming directly towards him.
if succeed, the doors will open. Upon the failure, the security system that is taking control over this part of the ship will be aware and might send the drone that will kill the player over time. However, after unlocking the door, player will be able to access another part of the ship.
As we go through the ship, you should expect for the AI to become increasingly frustrated that you're not listening to them and also not dead. There's a fair bit of humor intended. There's a fair bit of humor intended in this game, in the audio, to kind of break up from the serious and kind of spooky nature of the ship at times. So.
Another way we've facilitated environmental design and storytelling is by showing the way the ship is constantly breaking down. After all, you are being attacked by pirates and the AI simultaneously. One thing that we found was just by the use of clutter, the player could definitely better understand their environment and the way they go through it. Even just by adding simple signs across up on the walls, the player can better understand where they are within the game world.
Upon arriving to another important room in the environment, player will be again welcomed by the short scene with the AI.
Why would you possibly be in the drone bay? Hang on one moment. Stay there while I assist with error. On-site bombs fail to engage. It seems you somehow managed to break the self-repair systems too. Excellent job. A very useful pilot. A very useful amount of space being occupied at all times. Incredible job.
So in this room, the goal of the player will be to interact again with the water flow puzzle observed in the clone room. Upon the completion, if the puzzle is successful, one of these drones will be launched and will attack the pirate ship that is attacking the player ship. However, if the player fails, then the overall time left for the player to solve the game will be decreased, as the pirates will be able to quicker get into the ship and kill the player. In this room, after completing this puzzle or failing it, player will be first time introduced to the camera system, which will be scattered across the game. Again, the first time when the player is interacting with the camera, he will be welcomed by the AI, which will explain what he is experiencing at the moment.
Pilot Elise, I'm sorry for trying to kill you and your clones. To compensate, please step into the light of the cameras. It will help us increase risk retrieval by up to 400%.
In the example of the first camera the player is encountering, even if he will arm the security system, the game will not kill him, the AI will not launch the drone, and the player will be able to progress further in the game. It is done to teach the player about the danger in the friendly environment, that he will not be punished for the actions that he is taking. And as the further in the game, the system will become more and more punishing. After this, player will be able to collect the second tool, which is the hacking tool, as in the example of the fixing tool. In the future iteration of the game, it will have its specific aesthetic style, which will be connected with the rest of the tools scattered across the game. After this room, and the fact that the player collected the hacking tool, he will have access to the bigger part of the environment. And the next part of the game, which will take place in the warehouse. So again, we can observe the thing that the Momchi was saying before about showing the route to the player by showcasing the name of the area he's going towards on top of the screen. So after arriving at the warehouse, player will be able to hack through by interacting.
The goal of this puzzle is to press the arrows when they are found inside of the circle.
Which, like with the rest of the puzzles which we presented before, this puzzle is really easy to increase in the overall difficulty over time. And again, it is possible to introduce new functionality for this puzzle to iterate it even truly.
As well, some of the things that we're seeing on screen, we're going to be incorporating a tablet. Basically, it's what we will see the ship's diagnostics on. It will essentially be like the start menu. It will show us what objectives need to be done, as well as you can replay audio logs and such as well. You'll be able to access tools from it as well. It works technology-wise within the ship, and as well, it's familiar with the audience.
So after entering the warehouse, player will be first time seeing more cameras at work. So the goal of the player is to avoid those cameras. Whenever he comes into the field of the view of the camera, it starts to arm. After 3 seconds, it found the player, and the security system will launch its actuator to kill the player. It will come in the form of the drone, laser, or the bomb, depending on the situation and the area in the environment. In general, the goal of this system is to kill the player and use his clones so he can restart the game. As the player will not be able to just storm through this level because the cameras sooner or later will just find him and he will be dead, he will need to adapt and find his way through the environment.
The design of the warehouse was meant to be the largest area of the ship. Since it's a mining ship, it's going to be the biggest area. We have these small nooks everywhere around a very tall and intimidating space.
So intended path for the player is to go the left side of the main entrance, and then by interacting and sneaking through a few areas and avoiding few cameras, the player will be given a chance of choosing his own path through the environment, as can be observed in this point of the level, where the player can both take the straight path or go right. So if the player goes straight, he will be just going through, and then through the hidden corridor, which will of course cover him from the cameras, to the next part of the game. However, if the player wishes to, he will be able to achieve exactly the same outcome by sneaking through different cameras and just going straight to the point, which might become harder or easier depending on the situation. As mentioned before, we are planning to reward the player for the exploration via lore bits scattered across the level. As one of these areas will be present in the warehouse, and I would like to show a short sneak peek of this. So if the player just walk a little bit down the main path, he will be able to find the area that after a little of the parkour part and a little camera puzzle, which in this instance, if the player armed this camera, the actuator will spawn just above him, which will be a very quick and swift death. Because in the example of the normal warehouse drones, they will come from the side of the warehouse. That's always expected by the player, so he could adapt and learn this and apply some strategy to this. In this case, if the camera find the player, the drone will just jump down and most likely will just kill the player.
Once again, it is good to note that the player is completely helpless in fighting against these different enemies. The only way they can potentially run away or hide is by interacting with the environment and hiding through different crates, or trying to run away and get away from the sensors as fast as possible.
I think thematically that works really well as well. Since this is only a mining ship and you are, a miner, you don't really need to fight anything as part of your job.
It fits with the first person perspective as well, because the first person is meant to be, especially in stealth games, more atmospheric and more depowering to the player than a third person perspective.
And after traversing this part of the warehouse, the player will encounter another puzzle, which will be basically cameras on one wall, and the player will need to follow the conveyor belt and boxes on this conveyor belt to avoid detection. Whenever the player dies in the level, he will respawn again in the cloning room. As we can observe, one of the clones present in the environment will disappear, which will inform the player about the fact that he used one of his clones. Whenever the player dies, the remaining clone stays in the level, which increases the engagement and immersion of the game. And coming back to the spread that we have started from, I would like thank you very much for the attention. And that's it from us. Thank you.